She was the pilot everyone laughed at before takeoff. Then radar locks screamed across every cockpit but hers. In the next 6 minutes, missiles went dumb, an enemy tower burned, and the squadron's biggest ego learned her name the hard way. This is how Moth flew them all home alive. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The briefing room at Forward Operating Base Solace smelled like burnt coffee and cold steel. Rain hammered the corrugated roof in uneven bursts, and somewhere down the hall a generator groaned like it resented being awake. Second Lieutenant Maya Ortiz sat in the back row with her flight bag between her boots, a laminated checklist unfolded across her knee, and a mechanical pencil she kept clicking without noticing she was doing it. She was 23. She had been in the squadron for 11 days. "You're going to wear a hole through that thing," said Captain Elena Vasquez, dropping into the seat beside her. Vasquez was the squadron's only other reason. The ready room wasn't a complete boys' club, and she had a soft spot for anyone who showed up early. "Relax. It's a patrol. You'll fly the wing, keep your mouth shut, and be back in time for dinner." "I know," Maya said. "I just want to be ready." "You're always ready. That's your whole personality." "Don't let him get to you," Vasquez added, dropping her voice. "Cole's been flying long enough that he thinks instinct is the only thing that matters. He forgot instinct is just pattern recognition wearing a leather jacket. You build patterns a different way. Doesn't make it wrong. Try telling him that." "I have. Repeatedly. It bounces off him like rain off a windshield." Maya allowed herself a small laugh, the first of the morning, and clicked her pencil twice more before setting it down. Around them, the rest of the squadron trickled in, First Lieutenant Danny Ruiz with his flight bag slung over one shoulder, arguing good-naturedly with a mechanic about a bet neither of them would remember by lunch, Captain Alexei Petrov folding himself into a chair near the front, already half asleep after a night shift he clearly hadn't fully recovered from. A handful of junior officers Maya still hadn't learned all the names of, murmuring about weather and fuel loads and whether the coffee machine in the ready room would ever be fixed. Before Maya could answer Vasquez further, the door banged open hard enough to rattle the projector screen, and Major Derek Cole walked in like the room had been built specifically to receive him. Cole was 36, broad through the shoulders, with the kind of tan that only came from years of low-level combat sorties over deserts that didn't appear on tourist maps. He had 4 confirmed kills from 2 different conflicts, and he made sure every new pilot in the squadron heard about at least 3 of them within the first week. "Morning, everybody," Cole said, and then his eyes found Maya in the back row, and his mouth curved into the smile he reserved for exactly this purpose. "Morning, Ortiz. I see you've got your homework done." A ripple of laughter went through the room. Not cruel, exactly, more the reflexive kind, the kind that came from pilots who had learned to laugh at whatever Cole pointed at because it was easier than being the next target. "Just reviewing the signals brief, sir," Maya said, keeping her voice level. "The signals brief." Cole picked up her printed pages from where they sat squared on her knee, flipped through them with theatrical slowness. Pages of annotated frequency charts, her own handwriting crowding the margins in blue ink. "You annotated the signals brief. There's a pattern in the low band returns off the ridge line. It doesn't match the standard threat library." "Doesn't match the threat library," Cole repeated, like he was tasting the words to see if they were as ridiculous as he suspected. He set the pages back down, patted them once, the gesture somewhere between approval and dismissal. "Ortiz, I flew combat missions before you finished middle school. You know what I never did? I never once won a fight by out-reading the enemy. I won by being faster, meaner, and better than they were. The jet does the thinking. You do the flying. With respect, sir, the jet only thinks with the data we give it." The room went quiet in the particular way rooms go quiet when someone has said something true that nobody wanted to hear out loud. Cole's smile didn't move, but something behind his eyes did. "Cute," he said. "Real cute. Tell you what, you keep doing your extra credit, Lieutenant. I'll keep flying the mission. He turned to the room at large, raising his voice to reclaim it. All right, listen up. Today's patrol runs the Kestrel Corridor, standard border overwatch, 4-ship. I've got lead, Vasquez on my wing, Ortiz and Petrov as element 2. Command says the other side's been pushing sorties right up to the line the last 3 days, testing our response. Nothing we haven't handled 100 times. Rules of engagement are defensive only, you don't fire unless fired upon. Questions? Maya raised her hand. Cole exhaled through his nose, a small, visible act of patience being spent. The anomalous returns I mentioned, she said. They're clustered right along the corridor, sir. If there's a passive tracking network stitched together out of civilian maritime radar, our standard countermeasure loadout won't account for it. I built an alternate EW profile last night. I'd like authorization to load it. We do not, Cole said, each word landing with deliberate weight, modify combat loaded systems on a whim before a routine patrol. You fly the jet the Air Force gave you, the way the Air Force configured it. Are we clear? Yes, sir. Good. Dismissed. Wheels up in 40. The pilots filed out past her, a few of them not quite meeting her eyes, a couple of them grinning the way people grin when they've just watched someone else get put in their place and are relieved it wasn't them. Vasquez lingered. He's not wrong that we can't just rewrite the jet before every flight, Vasquez said quietly. But he's not right either. You know that. I know, Maya said. So what are you going to do? Maya looked down at the folder in her hands, at the alternate EW profile she'd spent 4 hours building on a government laptop that was never supposed to leave the Intel shop. She'd copied it onto a data cartridge anyway, sealed it in a static bag, and tucked it into the calf pocket of her flight suit that morning, half out of habit and half out of something that felt, uncomfortably, like a premonition. I'm going to follow orders, she said. And I'm going to be ready in case following orders isn't enough. The flight line was a wall of noise and heat. Ground crews moved between the jets in practiced choreography, fuel trucks idling, the whine of auxiliary power units rising and falling like insects. Maya's crew chief, a stocky sergeant named Boone who had opinions about everything and shared most of them, met her at the base of the ladder. She's clean, Lieutenant. Full defensive loadout, tanks topped, and I personally checked your radar warning receiver twice because I know you'll ask. You're a good man, Boone. I'm an underpaid man. Go kill some boredom out there. She climbed into the cockpit and let the familiar ritual settle her, harness, oxygen, comms check, the slow methodical sweep across every switch and readout that other pilots called overkill and she called staying alive. Below her, Boone walked one final circuit of the airframe, running a bare hand along the leading edge of the wing the way a groom might check a horse before a race, and gave her a thumbs up through the canopy glass that she returned without thinking, an old habit from flight school that had never worn off. The other 3 jets came alive around her one by one, engines spinning up into a rising chorus that vibrated through the airframe and up into her teeth. Over the interflight frequency, she could hear the ordinary noise of a squadron getting ready to fly, Petrov complaining about a sticky canopy latch, Vasquez running through her own checklist in a clipped, efficient murmur, Cole saying nothing at all, already settled into the particular silence he reserved for the minutes before takeoff, as if the swagger were something he only carried on the ground. When she reached the electronic warfare panel, she paused. The regulation said don't modify combat-loaded systems. It didn't say don't understand them completely. She spent the last 3 minutes before engines start doing something no one had explicitly forbidden, mapping, in her head, exactly where in the standard software architecture she would need to intervene if the moment ever came. If she ever needed to shift from the approved profile to her own, she wanted the path memorized down to the keystroke, so that if the moment came, it wouldn't feel like a decision. It would feel like reflex. Then she pulled her helmet on, and the moment passed, and she was just a pilot going to work. Kestrel flight, Solace Tower, cleared for takeoff, runway 18, wind calm. Copy tower, Kestrel lead rolling, Cole said, and 4 jets in staggered formation clawed their way into a pale, overcast sky. The patrol was uneventful for the better part of an hour, which was exactly how patrols were supposed to be. They flew a lazy racetrack pattern along the corridor, the ocean beneath them the color of wet slate, the far coastline a smudge of haze on the horizon. Petrov, flying Maya's element lead, kept up a low murmur of small talk on the secondary frequency, something about a bet he'd lost to a mechanic over a card game, and Maya let herself half listen while her eyes never stopped moving across her displays. It was the stillness that bothered her. Not the visible stillness, the radar picture was clean, no unusual air activity, nothing on the surface search worth a second look. It was the electromagnetic stillness underneath it. The low-band anomaly she'd flagged in the brief was there, right where she'd predicted, a faint rhythmic pulse buried under the noise floor like a heartbeat under a blanket. It wasn't doing anything. It was just, waiting. Kestrel lead, Kestrel 4, she said. I'm still tracking that low-band signature from this morning's brief. It's active, sir. Just passive so far. Copy, Ortiz, Cole said, and there was an edge of tired patience in his voice, the sound of a man who has decided arguing costs more than it's worth. Keep an eye on it. Recommend we hold our current altitude and avoid closing distance to the ridge line until we understand what it's doing. We're 8 miles off the line, Lieutenant. We're fine. You worry too much, Ortiz, Petrov said over the secondary frequency, not unkindly. Out here it's always something. Fishing boats, weather balloons, some fisherman's radio that hasn't worked right since the Cold War. You'll learn to let it go. Maybe, Maya said, though she didn't believe it, and didn't stop watching the trace. She thought about the ridge line the way she thought about a chess opening she didn't yet understand, not with fear, exactly, but with the specific, itching discomfort of knowing a piece was on the board that shouldn't be there and not yet knowing what it was for. She ran the numbers again in her head, 3 points along the coast, spaced with a regularity that felt engineered rather than accidental, each one silent on its own, each one utterly unremarkable if you only looked at it in isolation. It was the kind of pattern that was invisible unless you were specifically looking for it, and she had spent 4 hours the night before doing exactly that. 6 minutes later, Cole nudged the formation 2 degrees east, tightening the racetrack, shaving the margin down without announcing it, the kind of small, confident adjustment a lead pilot made 100 times a mission without thinking twice. The low-band signature woke up. It didn't announce itself with the shriek of a radar warning receiver. It came instead as a change Maya only caught because she had spent 4 hours the night before learning exactly what to look for, a subtle shift in phase across 3 separate points along the coastline, points that had no business synchronizing unless something was deliberately stitching them together. Lead, this is 4, I'm seeing synchronized activity across 3 ground stations, they're building a composite track. The radio erupted. It happened to Vasquez first. Her voice came through ragged and sharp, cutting straight across Maya's transmission. Radar lock. I've got a radar lock, high band, tracking. Then Petrov, a half second behind her, his voice climbing an octave. Lock. I'm painted, where is that coming from? Then Cole, and this was the part that would stay with Maya longer than anything else that happened that day, the sound of the squadron's most confident pilot going, for just an instant, completely silent, before his training reasserted itself over his shock. All aircraft, defensive maneuvers, break, break, break. Maya's own radar warning receiver said nothing. She looked down at it twice, certain it had failed, running a rapid systems check with the part of her brain that hadn't yet caught up to what was happening. It hadn't failed. It was simply, genuinely, quiet. While 3 other radar warning receivers screamed around her, hers sat dark and calm, and for one disorienting second she didn't understand why, and then she did. The enemy system wasn't painting the sky with a single powerful beam the way old Soviet-era radar did. It was doing something far more surgical, triangulating a composite track by comparing subtle timing differences across the three shore-based emitters, essentially building a picture of the formation's position through correlation rather than raw power. It was a system built to defeat exactly the kind of aircraft flying against it. And Maya, without asking permission, without loading her modified profile, had one thing the others didn't: she had spent the whole patrol running her onboard processor in a passive analysis mode, quietly cross-referencing the very same emitters against her own signals catalog, because Cole had told her to keep an eye on it and she had taken him literally. Which meant her jet's defensive suite, still on the approved profile but fed with data the others weren't collecting, had already recognized the correlation pattern as a threat and begun, automatically, exactly as designed, just faster than anyone else because it had a head start, adjusting its own emissions timing to break the very same correlation the enemy system depended on. She wasn't invisible by design. She was invisible by accident of preparation, a half step ahead of a trap built to catch everyone else. Lead, this is 4, I am not locked, repeat, I am not being tracked. Maya called, forcing her voice into the flattest, calmest register she owned. It's a composite triangulation system, it needs all three ground stations correlating cleanly. If you break the geometry, you break the lock. I don't have time for a geometry lesson, Ortiz. Cole snapped, his jet already rolling hard, chaff blooming behind him in a silver cloud. Missile launch, I've got smoke off the ridge. The white contrail lanced up from the coastline, arcing toward Cole's aircraft with a speed that made the whole exchange feel suddenly, terribly real. Maya watched it on her display, watched the geometry solve itself in her head the way it always did, numbers and vectors falling into place with a clarity that had nothing to do with courage and everything to do with the thousands of hours she'd spent doing exactly this kind of math for fun, alone, in a simulator, while other cadets went to parties. Lead, hard turn, 90 degrees left, now, not away from it, across it, she said. You can't outrun the closure rate, you have to break the angle before it goes terminal. There was half a second where nothing happened, where Cole's pride and Cole's training fought each other in real time, and then his jet snapped hard left, exactly as she'd said, and the missile, which had built its entire terminal guidance solution on the assumption of a straight retreat, sliced through the space where his aircraft would have been and detonated harmlessly against empty sky. The shock wave rattled his airframe hard enough that his voice, when it came back, had lost every trace of its earlier certainty. Lock's gone. Lock's gone, I don't, how did you? No time, sir, Maya said. Vasquez, Petrov, same maneuver, 90 degrees across the threat axis, not away from it, do it now. They did. 2 more missiles went dumb in the sky, their guidance solutions unraveling the moment the predictable retreat they were built to intercept simply failed to occur. For 3 long seconds the radio was nothing but breathing and static, 4 pilots hanging in the sky above a coastline that had just tried, with real intent, to kill all of them. Kestrel flight, status, Cole said, and Maya heard something new in his voice, not command, not yet, but the beginning of a question he didn't know how to ask. 4 is green, Maya said. 2 is green, that was too close, Vasquez said. 3's green, I think I aged 10 years, Petrov added, a shake still audible under the attempted joke. Lead's green, Cole said. And then, after a pause that felt longer than it was, Ortiz. Talk to me. What just happened? It's a triangulated tracking network, sir, exactly what I flagged this morning. 3 emitters, passive listening posts most likely disguised as maritime infrastructure, correlating our position instead of painting us directly. It's built to defeat conventional break maneuvers because it doesn't rely on a single continuous radar beam the way our threat library assumes. That's why standard evasion, running, diving, standard chaff timing, doesn't work against it. But it depends on clean geometry between all 3 stations and the target. Break that geometry hard and fast, and the correlation falls apart before the missile can resolve. How the hell do you know that? I ran the math last night, sir. It's in the folder you handed back to me. Another silence, shorter this time, and heavier. They're not done, Maya said, watching a new set of returns bloom on her display, faster movers this time, climbing off an inland strip that hadn't shown a single aircraft on the surveillance picture 10 minutes earlier. For bandits, inbound, they were holding on the ground specifically for this. They knew we'd be exactly here. We are not equipped for a 4 versus 4 with an active SAM site still live, Cole said, and for the first time all morning he sounded like he was asking rather than telling. Ortiz, I need options, not a lecture. They'll expect us to run for open water, Maya said, already banking, already thinking 3 moves ahead in a way that felt less like bravery and more like the only kind of calm she knew how to produce. We split instead. Vasquez and Petrov, climb and go loud, draw the fighters north, away from the SAM envelope, use your radar aggressively, make yourselves the obvious threat. Lead, you're with me, we stay low and quiet and take the site itself off the board so it can't reset the correlation and re-engage anyone. Take the site off the board with what? We're carrying air-to-air only. The gun, sir. And angles. If we come in low along the wave line from the seaward approach, their optical backup won't have a clean look at us until we're inside minimum engagement range for their missiles, and by then it's a cannon problem, not a radar problem. Cole didn't answer right away. Maya could picture him doing what she was doing, running the numbers, hating that they worked, hating more that they were the only numbers on the table. Vasquez, Petrov, you copy the plan, he finally said. Copy, lead, Vasquez answered. Going loud, drawing them north. On my mark, Cole said, and then, quieter, almost to himself, Ortiz. You're flying my wing on this one. Not the other way around. Understood? Understood, sir, Maya said, and did not point out that for the last 90 seconds, it had very much been the other way around. The run-in was the longest 4 minutes of Maya's life. She and Cole dropped to just above the wave tops, the ocean a blur beneath them, spray occasionally kissing the canopy as they skimmed low enough to hide beneath the coastal radar horizon. Behind and above them, the fight between Vasquez, Petrov, and the 4 inbound fighters had turned the northern sky into a chaotic knot of contrails and radio chatter, aggressive and loud exactly as planned, dragging every scrap of enemy attention with it. Distance to the site, 3 miles, Maya called, her voice steady even as her pulse hammered against her ribs. They shouldn't have optical acquisition yet at this altitude. You'd better be right about that, Cole muttered. I'm right about the math, sir. I can't promise anything about their optics crew having a bad day and looking the wrong way at the right time. Comforting. At 2 miles, the island resolved out of the haze, low, scrubby, deceptively empty-looking, the kind of terrain that could hide a radar tower and a missile battery under camouflage netting and nobody flying past at altitude would ever notice. Maya's threat display flickered once, a brief attempt at optical tracking that failed to resolve into a solid lock, exactly as she'd calculated. Master arm, hot, Cole said. Ortiz, you take the tower, I'll suppress the launcher. Copy. They split at the last possible second, Cole's jet peeling right toward the low rectangular shape of the missile launcher, Maya banking left toward the thin lattice tower that housed the correlation equipment, the actual brain of the system, the thing that had turned 3 ordinary-looking emitters into a trap built to kill an entire flight of aircraft. She lined up the gun pipper, felt the airframe shudder as the cannon spooled, and held the trigger down for exactly as long as the geometry demanded and not a second longer. The tower folded in on itself in a cascade of sparks and twisted steel. Behind her, Cole's cannon fire walked across the launcher in a neat, brutal line, and a secondary explosion, propellant, most likely, cooking off inside a damaged missile canister, sent a column of black smoke rolling up into the pale sky. Splashed the sight, Cole said, and there was something raw and disbelieving in his voice, like a man who had just watched a theory he'd never believed in prove itself true in the worst possible classroom. Vasquez, Petrov, radars down on the ground, you're clear to disengage north and RTB, Maya called. Copy that, gladly, Vasquez answered, breathless. Splash 1 bandit up here, the other 3 are bugging out toward the coast. We are very happy to let them go. For a moment nobody spoke at all. The adrenaline that had carried Maya through the last 6 minutes began to recede, leaving behind it a bone-deep shakiness in her hands that she hadn't noticed until she reached up to wipe sweat from beneath her visor and found her fingers trembling against the glass. She flexed them once, twice, and made herself breathe the way she'd been taught in survival training, 4 counts in, 4 counts held, 4 counts out, until the shaking settled into something manageable. Below and behind her, the smoke from the missile launcher was still climbing into the sky, a dark smudge against the pale horizon that would be visible on satellite imagery within the hour and would generate exactly the kind of after-action questions she already knew she'd be answering for weeks. She didn't mind. Questions she could handle. It was silence, the kind that had waited quietly under the noise floor all morning while nobody but her had been listening, that she'd learned to fear. This is lead, Cole said, breaking the quiet. Rejoin on me. Let's go home. Copy, lead, Maya said, and eased her throttle forward, sliding back into formation on his wing, the ocean spreading out beneath them wide and gray and, for the moment, entirely empty of threats. The flight back to Solace was quiet in a way that had nothing to do with radio discipline. Maya flew tight formation off Cole's wing, watching the coastline recede behind them, watching her fuel gauge, watching everything the way she always did, except now there was no one left in the sky to laugh at her for it. Ortiz, Cole said, somewhere over open water, his voice different than it had been in the briefing room that morning, quieter, stripped of its performance. That folder. The one I handed back to you like it was a joke. Yes, sir. I want a copy on my desk before end of day. And I want you running the signals brief for the whole squadron tomorrow morning, not sitting in the back row of it. Yes, sir. There was a pause, filled only by the low thrum of the engine and the wind noise over the canopy. You saved my life up there, Cole said. Twice, actually, if I'm being honest about the count. I was doing the math, sir. That's all. Yeah, Cole said, and for the first time all day, there was something that might have been a real smile in his voice. I noticed. The runway lights of Solace came up out of the haze ahead of them, and the 4 jets of Kestrel flight lined up in formation for the approach, wingtip to wingtip, the way they were supposed to. On the ground, the crew chiefs were already gathering at the edge of the tarmac, drawn by whatever fragments of the radio traffic had made it back to base ahead of the aircraft themselves, and among them stood Boone, arms crossed, watching the sky with an expression that was trying very hard to look unbothered and failing completely. Maya brought her jet down onto the runway with the same careful precision she brought to everything, rolled out, and taxied toward her spot on the line. When she finally popped the canopy and pulled off her helmet, the noise of the base rushed in around her, engines spooling down, ground crews shouting instructions, the ordinary chaos of a day at war. Cole was already on the tarmac when she climbed down the ladder, waiting at the bottom instead of walking past her the way he had every other day for the last 11. He didn't say anything clever. He didn't make a joke about homework or extra credit. He simply held out his hand, and when she shook it, he held the grip a beat longer than a handshake usually lasted. Lieutenant Ortiz, he said, loud enough for the pilots gathering nearby to hear. Good flying today. Thank you, sir, she said. Good flying yourself. Behind him, Vasquez was grinning, and Petrov gave her an exhausted, grateful thumbs up, and somewhere in the crowd Boone was already telling anyone who would listen that he'd personally checked her radar warning receiver twice that morning, as if that fact alone explained everything that had happened. Maya tucked her helmet under her arm, felt the data cartridge still resting in the calf pocket of her flight suit, and used an unnecessary in the end, and walked toward the squadron building in the long gold light of the afternoon. Inside, the debrief room was already filling up, chairs scraping against the floor, someone pulling up the mission recorder data on the main screen so the whole flight could walk back through the engagement frame by frame. Cole took the seat at the head of the table out of habit, then, after a moment's hesitation that nobody but Maya seemed to notice, stood back up and gestured toward it. Ortiz, he said. You're running this one. A few of the pilots exchanged glances, but nobody laughed, and nobody made a joke about homework. Maya set her folder down on the table, the same folder Cole had flipped through that morning with theatrical amusement, its pages still creased from where his hand had held them, and looked around the room at the faces watching her, waiting. "All right," she said, opening to the first annotated page. "Let's talk about the low-band anomaly, and why the threat library needs to change." Nobody laughed at that either. Outside, the sun kept sinking toward the water, and the bass kept humming along with its ordinary evening business, and inside the debrief room, for the first time since she'd arrived at Solace, Maya Ortiz spoke and the whole room listened, and she was no longer the pilot anyone would ever again think to laugh at.